All right, folks, today we are going to jump into the incredible features of After Effects, learning some 2.5D content. We're starting in Photoshop, and I'm just going to kind of create a file here entitled 2.5D. Our aspect ratio, we're going to maintain at 720 by 480 NTSC DV. And today we're going to be creating a series of assets in what 3D animators often refer to as orthographic views. So, for example, today I'm going to create this thing called a ground plane. And I'll need to kind of just show what this does for just a little bit, because we're really just going to be creating things from sort of these odd angles. In other words, this ground plane is going to be created. I want you to just kind of imagine that it's created from a top view, and I'm just kind of coming over here and just painting out little plots right here, and so like that. And then I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to maybe call this a tree, and I'm going to create this tree from a sort of a basic, just sort of front perspective. And you'll kind of have to bear with me. I'm just sort of going to turn off that background layer just so, because it's kind of distracting me from kind of what I'm looking for. But you can give us a little bit of transparency here. The opacity will kind of help our tree. Maybe that's a little too transparent. But the key, again, to making stuff look nice is very much in its ability to vary sort of brush angles. And so I'm drawing that little tree. I'm going to create another layer here, and we're going to call this our park bench. So I'm going to call this bench side. And we're going to kind of just create the side of the bench in pieces. So again, it's on a separate layer. Just kind of creating something like this. Like so. I'm going to create another layer. And this is going to be our top. I'll say bench top. And you might start to get an idea of sort of what we're doing here. Might be a bit obtuse at first. But here we are. Here's the top of our bench. Let's create just a really simple animated character just to kind of remind ourselves how easy it is to use a video layer, because we're doing frame by frame content. And note the film leader icon. I'm going to switch our scenario here to 12 frames per second so that we can in fact shoot on twos. And let's turn off these other assets here. I'm going to come up. I'm going to call this our character. And we're going to make this character we're just going to do the cheapest walk cycle any of us can even imagine. There's my character with his in contact pose. Drawing with this mouse isn't easy, but a worthy challenge. Kind of bring my workspace over here, and we'll go enable our onion skins, and let's do our kind of low pose. kind of a lumbering Popeye kind of feel here. Here's going to be our passing pose or toe lift. And then let's do our high pass. And there we have the bare bones basic of a walk cycle. Kind of test how it's looking. Any questions? Any questions about what I've done so far? Well, we might as well create a few clouds in the sky. Let's do this. Just on a normal layer. Just kind of there we are. Cloud, character, assets. Let's be sure to save this, save as. And again, we're going to call this 2.5D content. Save it as a PSD file. And we'll open up After Effects. Create a new project. And we'll be swift to bring that project in. Like so. Note that we brought it in as a composition, like always. And we're going to just double click on this to kind of bring up our layers. In After Effects, we can use our scrub wheel here to kind of zoom in and out on this. You'll notice though that our character kind of just disappears right away, right? We're not actually going to be able to use that content. Even if we were to loop it, it would create some issues for us. So we're going to actually come back and render off this content, all this between this layer, as a QuickTime movie with an alpha channel on it. I'm just going to quickly rename this walk cycle. QuickTime. And we want animation high quality. We want to make sure we have straight unmatted alpha on, which does what? Preserves that transparency. Let me just let's call this walk cycle 3 just in case. And in After Effects, we'll just quickly import the project we brought in. Right there as footage. And we're going to come back to that. So I'm going to just sort of turn off our benches here for just a moment and show you what I would call the price of admission content today. Heads up with this, drop some notes in the Google Doc because this is kind of the new and wondrous stuff that several adventurous individuals have used in the past. May it be you this quarter. You see this little box right here? It says 3D layer allows layers to be manipulated in 3 dimensions. Now, if we click on this, you're familiar with all of these transformations. In fact, you've been honed, toned, and professionally trained to use all of them. But you'll notice that they only have values in X and Y. Not anymore. If we click on this, boom. And yes, I wanted that in the tutorial. Boom. We've got 3 degrees of freedom, X, Y, and Z, and 3 axes, X, Y, and Z, respectively. If I take this layer here in the ground, and you'll notice my Z axis is coming out at us, Y is green, moving in our Y direction, and X is red, I can actually rotate this in X and flatten it. Let's make this a healthy 90 degrees by just sort of typing it in and then just bringing this down. Check it out. I can make a ground plane. Now let's come back to this. Let's do it to the tree as well. Activate the 3D layer. I can hit hotkey S in this case and maybe even scale this down a wee bit. Set it right on top of this little region here. Maybe I decide, oh, 1 tree is not enough. So I could use 2, and we can use the X value to push this back into our picture plane. I could use rotation in Y to kind of flip the tree so it looks less homogeneous. Could even give it a little bit of a manipulation in its scale. Conveniently, we've got our clouds back in the distance there, right? If I make this 3D, we can have our clouds kind of moving around. If I bring in my walk cycle animation, we see our character here. I can make this character 3D, and you'll notice that, in fact, let's bring this down really nice and small. Place our character in the space. It's going for a nice little walk in the park. How do I make this loop if I want to? You are so on fire today, folks. Right-click, interpret footage, main, type in the number of times, let's say 20. Click OK, and we can extend this out. Just crop this over here. Got our character walking, and we can use our position function to have our character move through space 3-dimensionally. So I can have the character coming over here and even coming out in Z. So I hit spacebar, and the character is actually moving in X, Y, and Z trajectory. Now, here's the cool part. You're kind of saying to yourself, what is the big deal about this? I can do this without using all of this 3-dimensional nonsense. We can go up here to Layer, New, Camera. And this is where stuff gets considerably more awesome. Hitting hotkey C on your keyboard allows you to do this. Check that out. And you can use a 3-button mouse experience. The left mouse button, it does this. This is called tumbling. The middle mouse button is what we call tracking. And then the right mouse button, dollies. Often mistaken for a zoom. A zoom is a lens effect. A dolly is a camera move. So check that out. Suddenly we have dimensionality. Let's make our cloud animate right here, just for the fun of it. Hit hotkey P, and we're just gonna make this animate. It's kind of moving along. Maybe I decide, oh, I'm going to just duplicate that. Let's do our position move, and I'm going to bring this further back in the distance, and let's maybe even push this back further. So we've got something like this happening. What's that, you say? Still not enough? Well, we can actually animate the camera position. So I can simply set a keyframe right here, move forward in time, and then rotate my camera, maybe even zoom away. So behold, we've got parallax for free. But I can hear the unrest in your breathing. You want more. What if you want to model something in 3 dimensions? Well, let's do it. I'm going to take these 2 pieces of our bench. And this may answer Ariel's question about can you combine layers in After Effects? The answer is yes. We can go over here, we can select these 2 layers. I'm going to go to layer, something called pre-compose, all the way at the bottom. And I'm going to call this 3D bench. Moving all the attributes into this new layer, I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to double click this to just access this specific layer right here, which I'm going to turn back on. So check this out. I'm going to turn on my 3D layer. Actually, before I do that, let me center my pivot points. Center my pivot points so that we have an easy place to kind of manipulate our objects. I'm just going to take these pivot points and move them. But I'm going to now turn on my 3D layers, enabling their ability to be manipulated in 3-dimensional space. I'm going to go up to Layer, New, Camera, just so I can start to see what's going on here. Hotkey C activates the camera properties. And watch this. I'm going to take this bench, and I'm going to hit rotational features. My rotate Y, if I rotate this 90 degrees, and then this 90 degrees. Oops. Let's try rotation Z. Oops. Guess I'm going to have to rely on my orientation. I think I arranged these in a complex way, and I apologize for that. But I've now rotated this. This is, again, X, Y, Z. Orientation is something you use when all else fails in your other components. After Effects doesn't have robust 3D settings. Rather, it kind of just has some limitations. So basically what I want to do here is I want to align this with my bench side. I'm going to duplicate this, bring this over like so, and then kind of bring this over and down, and over like so. And you kind of, in this way, have to kind of play around with this stuff. It takes just a little bit of finagling, and it's not quite as amazing as Maya, but it's also not nearly as hard. Put my bench right there. I kind of spin this around. Sometimes it helps to go into orthographic views like this. You know, this is sort of my my front view. And I'm just kind of laying that down there. You can kind of go to side views, say my left view. It's not very helpful. And we'll go back to our camera view. Active camera. But there we are. Almost there. And once I've got this reasonably placed, I'm going to hit Control D for duplicate. And we're going to hit hotkey R, and we're going to rotate this. Let's see here. There we are. It's always finding the right value. And there we have, folks, a park bench. I'm going to maybe move this bench side just a little bit more in. So we're literally taking objects in 3-dimension and we're offsetting them. We're placing them in a variety of ways next to each other. The cool news is we can go back to our 2.5D scenario. Though. What do we need to do to make this dimensionally sit in its proper place? Well, we first need to turn on 3D, right? Need to turn that on 3D. Let's scale it up. It's a little bit big. But look, do you notice it's not reading as a dimensional form? Anyone see that? Why not? Well, here's the secret that many professionals don't even know. You can use this little strange icon that makes absolutely no sense when read, collapse transformations, to enable its 3-dimensionality within After Effects space. So look at this. Now it is a 3D object. Probably a little bit too big, but we can scale it. There we are. So we have got ourselves a 3-dimensional object operating within our world. Let's make our ground plane just a little bit bigger. I have one last thing to do before we move on to our critique, and that is talk to you about the wonders of lighting. We can go up to Layer, New, Light, and choose from a variety of options. I'm going to choose Parallel to kind of imitate the rays of the sun. However, I'm going to do something kind of strange and make them almost more moon-like by adding a blue tint with our intensity here. Notice that it's already by default enabled to cast shadows. And I'm going to click OK. Suddenly everything goes dark. But watch this. Grab my position. I'm just going to kind of hold this out like so. Move this up a little bit and maybe pull it back. You'll notice that these are parallel rays of light that have a whole slew of features that you can manipulate, not just transformation-wise, but in this option box called Light Options. I'm going to crank up my light source here. And you may be asking the question, why aren't things casting shadows? Well, unfortunately, by default, nothing in 3D casts shadows until you actually turn it on. So in this particular case, if I go grab the trees, grab the bench, the clouds, maybe even our character, I can open this up and go to these material options and turn the option to cast shadows on. Notice what that did. Look at this. Off. This is shadows only. It's the way I turn off the objects. Then I can turn on the shadows, and you can see them casting on the ground. So check that out. Does anyone notice anything not casting shadows? Why is the bench not? We turned on its ability to cast shadows, did we not? Right here. The answer is we need to go back to our composition and quickly enable shadows here under material options. So those are now turned on, and watch. Boom, there we are. Now, other cool things. You notice that these shadows are a little bit funky, right? Does everybody notice that? They're kind of too dark. They sort of stick out. Maybe we don't even like the positioning of the shadows. Maybe we wish we could grab the direction of those shadows, control them a little bit more. Maybe, for crying out loud, we wish our background wasn't so dark. And we could go in here to our comp settings, maybe make this a white background. Gives it a little more interesting look. But you'll notice that the light properties themselves allow us to play with shadow darkness. So we can actually reduce this. We can actually reduce it. We can actually, we could also turn on some fall off and some radius. I'm not going to at the moment. But you notice how that makes the shadows much more agreeable, at least to our composition. Just reducing those shadows just a little bit. So to kind of pull back to complete our world here, I'm going to just hit play. And we have created a fully dimensional scene with lights and shadows. And you can add more lights in the scene. You can do all kinds of really, really awesome things. And I usually don't get to this lecture in this class because folks are brand new to After Effects and Photoshop as is, but many of you have had me before. And so you are ahead of the curve. Are there any general questions about what I just shared with you? I will render this out just for our own sort of personal health and well-being. Export, add to render queue. Always encourage you to use H.264, QuickTime, send it our pathway, along our pathway here. And you'll note that it will take a little bit of time to do a full-on 3D or a 2.5D render. So while this is a lecture that is not requiring you to use this technique next week, I encourage you to check out the lecture online here. Just kind of take a look here at our project. Think of the robustness of this. One of the things that I see very often is how often this is used in the industry and how often I never see it in student reels. It's such a great idea to kind of use a technique that's constantly used in the industry. And quite honestly, there isn't too much there isn't too much competition for doing it. I don't think a lot of folks even know about these aspects in Photoshop. So with that, completes our discussion today. And I'm not sure, did that close out the file? I hope it recorded. Oh man, well, let's I'll pull the text back over and see if it did record. Oh my god, did it not record? I don't think so. Oh no. Not sure where it ends up or if I even I hit escape. Is that close? Does that close out?
Escape? No, F10 closes out.
Oh, okay, so it might still be going.